the architect's residences. This was the exploration of floor plans and deducing what was structural, what was an enclosure, partition, or even an opening. I learned how to understand the floor plans by looking at pictures of the building and being able to allocate where on the plan these pictures were. I looked at many architects' residences such as Lindo Barbardi's Casa de Vidro, Villa Lem by Valerio Olgati, but I mainly focused on the Mole House by David Adjaye for Sue Webster. I focused on this because I found it to be a challenge as the plans were outdated and I had to deduce what the floor plans looked like from the images from my research. The final set of plans consist of all 4 levels, including a roof plan, the north, south, west, and east elevations, a section, as well as an isometric. Digital nomads. A digital nomad is a person who is able to travel and work remotely. There are many places that rent out spaces for people to work. This was a group project with Zach Unchier and Sasha. Our first building was Second Home Hollywood, where we focused on the single-use workspace. I specifically made a model studying the work-life balance as well as a stop motion. The second building was La Borda in Barcelona. This was a multi-use building with the mix of living as well as communal workspaces. I specifically looked at the circulation of this building and created a stop motion to demonstrate this. The final building was out in the landscape, which was Piotr & Co. This building didn't have floor plans. We came up with them from the images that we had acquired from our research, and I focused on the massing and also created a stop motion of this. It was a great way to learn about the building rather than just looking at pictures and floor plans, but actually modeling it itself. The familiar strange. This was the study of the modes of lives by looking at the parameters, regulations, and behaviors of those who inhabit the space. I started the brief off by exploring my own workspace and how I used it and created plans and point clouds. Then I was combined with a group of Yizu, Jafar, and Or, where we combined our spaces together that we had created. Then researched the routines, the time zones, everyone's habits, and how they used the space. I explored the ideas of familiarity and unfamiliarity. Jafar specifically thought of how much time was spent in a space is how familiar it is, or thought about the different viewpoints. If it's an unfamiliar viewpoint, therefore it's unfamiliar. Yizu considered ownership. If it's not in your room, therefore it's not familiar. I consider familiarity to items that can be recognizable, the recognition of a space. From this, I created a combined model, and from the combined model, I studied these habits and explored them in detail by creating 5 fragments of being in the bed, in the shoes, in the office, in the untouched, and everything but nothing views. I made a video as well demonstrating this model. From this, we expanded into the Term 2 Brief 2, where it was a continuation. We were encouraged to take inspiration from other briefs from other students in other classes, and I liked the idea of Elias's model that can be a transformable room, Sasha's idea of materiality and color with light, and Lisa's study of her own space and highlighting her computer to show the importance of the object within the space, which was relevant to my work. I explored the habits. I learned that 40 to 45% of the day is habit. So what is the non-habit? I used myself as a subject, and from this I deduced that I and my habits were work and not life. My non-habits were more the daily routines that other people usually have, deduced from obviously my other team members. I discovered that I never used spaces as their intended purposes, such as using my living room as a concrete room or my kitchen as a construction table for my models for my studies. From this, I created an inverted design where I played with the idea of this house that could turn inside out and have your work separate from your life. This idea then transformed to making a space that could be converted into other spaces or combined spaces to become others. Some worked and some didn't, such as combining the bedroom with the kitchen. This then created this colliding idea, much like Richard Wentworth's work. I played with the dimensions, and that's why I created two models, where the one was in 3D and the other was in 2D, to understand how functional such space could be and how you would move around. From this, I then created more rooms, ones that did and didn't work, combining a kitchen with an office, or the concreting room with the living room. This was an inspiring project, and I'd like to expand by exploring the ideas of adding more and more rooms and how many different configurations would be plausible. Term 3, Brief 1, was creating visual communication by observing a physical context and of the site analysis. I looked at the relationship between the place and the material. Specifically, this building that I had on Munster Road was made out of bricks, which was locally sourced, and we looked at the patterns of the brick bond, which was the Flemish and a stacked bond. I made sketches when I went to the location to keep in mind the different patterns of the bricks, and then created a site plan, which sadly I have not finished due to computer issues, and then also a isometric of the building, which I have a zoomed out version and a zoomed in version that also has the material hatching on it. The competition of Huguenot House. This was completed with Zach, Angela and Nijla. We first went and explored the actual location and the site. We looked at the weather patterns, the greenery. From this, and we looked at the demographics and wanted to understand who was there and who would be using the building. We then did a survey to see what people in the area actually wanted to do or have, and then started looking at inspiration. We came up with many iterations, lots of sketches that everyone then combined into our final product. The Breeze of Green. This is the project in which we then finalized on, where we created a vertical park. There's a lack of greenery, the city, specifically the inner city, as well as a lack of viewing points. And this is a public space where people are able to exercise, enjoy breath of fresh air, as well as have picnics and a communal herb garden with different plants, and there really be a burst of life in the middle of the city. We decided to maintain the core of the building, where we stripped all the sides off and kept the core as our central part, and then built a ramp around it. We also liked the idea that the materials of what we demolish could be used again in the concrete in the creation of these ramps. London being a rather rainy place, we have made trenches or rivers going down the inner side of the ramps that we use for the irrigation of the area, as well as little kiosks where people can get foods and snacks for their picnics. We also included an elevator in the design for the people who might not want to walk back down the ramp. And on the very lower floor, there's a large open green space for bowls, clubs, or open air cinemas and playing football matches. It's really a place for the community and bringing everyone together in a green space within the city, which is more of a hustle and bustle and a busy place, and it's a nice space to go and relax.